My name is Evelyn Hart. I'm 31 years old. And I didn't know my life was about to split cleanly in two until I realized that stability, real stability, can look a lot like control to the wrong person. People like to think love is fireworks, grand gestures, big emotions that drown out everything else. But love, the kind that actually lasts, is quiet. It's spreadsheets, it's savings accounts. It's showing up every single day without needing applause. That was always me. I work in accounting and project management for a major firm downtown. Numbers make sense to me. Systems do what they're told if you build them correctly. I bought my condo 2 years ago. No fixer-upper fantasy, no emotional impulse buy, just clean lines, a good neighborhood, and a mortgage I could manage alone if I had to. My life ran on order. No debt, no chaos, no surprises. That used to be my greatest strength, until it became the thing he resented most. I met Daniel, 30, 4 years ago. He was charming in a way that didn't feel rehearsed. Funny, social, effortlessly likable. He'd dated Maya, his ex-girlfriend, years before me. He said it was over, cleanly ended, no loose ends. I believed him. I had no reason not to. Daniel loved that I was grounded. He used to joke that I was the adult in the room. I paid on time. I planned ahead. I didn't panic when things went wrong. I fixed them. In the beginning, we balanced each other. I brought structure. He brought color. When he proposed a year and a half ago, it wasn't flashy. He used his grandmother's ring, an old piece with real history, not something trendy or oversized. I cried. Not because it was expensive, but because it felt intentional. I thought, he understands permanence. That illusion didn't survive wedding planning. What started as a shared vision quickly turned into a hostile takeover. We agreed on a $20,000 budget, pulled from our combined savings. Reasonable, elegant, enough. Then the vision expanded. Suddenly, it wasn't a wedding, it was a production. A $70,000 spectacle meant to dominate social media feeds and prove something to people I didn't even know. The extra $50,000 came from somewhere very specific. My house fund. The down payment I'd been building for years. I tried logic first. I laid everything out. Timelines, opportunity cost, future equity. I showed him the numbers. He didn't argue the math. He argued my character. If you really loved me, he said, you wouldn't make money the priority. It was the first time he turned my responsibility into a flaw. Somewhere along the way, my caution became control. My planning became suffocation. And I did the unthinkable. I liquidated the fund. I told myself it was temporary, that I could rebuild it after the wedding, that I was investing in our future. But the moment the money moved, the power shifted. 6 months before the wedding, Daniel quit his job. He said he needed space for creative clarity. Translation. I became the only income, the only structure, the only safety net. I created a separate vendor card with strict limits, merchant locks, instant freezes, corporate controls on a personal account. I told myself it was protection, not suspicion. The spending didn't slow. The entitlement grew. He stopped contributing and started criticizing. My order became his enemy. Every conversation turned into a referendum on my commitment. And deep down, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the rationalizations, I felt it. The chaos wasn't temporary. It was who he was when he didn't have an audience. And I was about to learn, very publicly, what happens when you finance someone else's need for validation. The moment Daniel stopped working, the condo changed. Not physically. Everything was still clean, still organized, still quiet in the way I'd designed it to be. But the air felt occupied, like every room was holding its breath, waiting for the next demand. At first, he acted like quitting was temporary, like it was just a reset. He'd talk about new opportunities, creative ideas, potential consulting, even starting a brand. He said those words the way people say someday, soft, dreamy, and conveniently distant. Meanwhile, the bills arrived in the present tense. I worked 60-hour weeks with my calendar broken into blocks like a battlefield plan. Wake up, commute, meetings, deadlines, vendor calls during lunch, payroll reports in the afternoon. Then home, where I should have been able to exhale. But home was where Daniel held court. He'd be sprawled on the couch with wedding blogs open on his laptop, phone in hand, scrolling like he was researching for a dissertation. Not about marriage, about applause. Look at this, he'd say, turning the screen toward me, like a judge presenting evidence. This is what people do for weddings now. People, not us. Not our budget, not our future, just people. Strangers whose highlight reels had become his standard. I'd set my bag down, loosen my heels, and before my brain even switched off from work mode, I'd be pulled into another emergency. The linens weren't the right texture. The lighting wasn't romantic enough. The menu font looked cheap. These weren't problems, they were performances. And I was expected to react the way an audience reacts. Wide-eyed, invested, grateful to be included. One night, I opened my laptop at the kitchen island and pulled up the wedding spreadsheet like it was a shield. "Daniel," I said gently, "we're over budget again. The venue upgrade alone." He cut me off with a sharp laugh that didn't sound like humor. "You and your spreadsheets," he said, leaning back. "Do you ever hear yourself? This is supposed to be exciting." "It is exciting," I said, keeping my voice even. "But this money isn't imaginary. The house fund is—" He slammed his hand lightly on the counter, not hard enough to break anything, just enough to signal dominance. "Stop calling it your house fund," he snapped. "It was our future." The word was landed like a nail. I stared at him for a second, trying to decide if he'd realized what he'd just admitted. He didn't seem to, because he wasn't looking at me like a partner. He was looking at me like an obstacle. And that was when the real pattern emerged. If I questioned a cost, I was cheap. If I asked for details, I was controlling. If I wanted accountability, I was ruining the vibe. Every boundary became a betrayal. He'd say it with this wounded tone too, like my responsibility was a personal attack. "You're making me feel like I'm not good enough," he'd whisper. And for a second, just a second, I'd feel guilty. Because Daniel was skilled at turning guilt into currency. He knew exactly how to frame things so that I was always the one apologizing, always the one trying to fix the mood. It wasn't just money, it was power. Once he had access to the wedding fund, once he knew I'd already sunk my future into his dream, he acted like he'd earned the right to treat me however he wanted. And then there was the phone. I didn't notice it all at once. It wasn't some dramatic shift. It was small. He started placing it face down on the coffee table. He started taking it into the bathroom. He started stepping outside to take calls that lasted 20 minutes. At first, I told myself I was paranoid. Maybe he was coordinating surprises. Maybe he was talking to vendors. Maybe he was trying to plan something sweet for me to make up for the stress. But the longer he stayed home, the more he needed places to go. And the places he went stopped making sense. Meeting with the florist, he'd say, leaving at 6 p.m. He'd come back at 2 a.m., with a grin too bright, like he'd been drinking. Sometimes I'd catch a scent on his jacket. Not perfume, something sharper, expensive, familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten. Men's cologne, the kind that lingers long after the person is gone. The kind you don't pick up from a bouquet of imported roses. When I finally brought it up, I did it carefully, calmly, like I was handling a fragile object. "Daniel," I said one night, "can we talk about something?" He didn't look up from his phone. "Sure. I've been feeling off lately," I began. "The late nights, the phone stuff." He sighed dramatically, finally lifting his eyes like I'd interrupted something sacred. "This again?" "It's not again. I'm just asking." He leaned forward, voice suddenly smooth, almost pitying. "You're spiraling because you need control," he said. "You can't stand not knowing every detail, every minute of my day." "That's not true." He tilted his head. "Isn't it?" And that was the trick. He didn't deny anything. He attacked my right to ask. "You should be proud I'm handling wedding planning," he said. "It's emotional labor, real labor. You act like because it doesn't come with a paycheck, it doesn't count." I swallowed hard. Because there it was again, the way he turned my practical concerns into moral failures. "Daniel," I said quietly, "I'm exhausted. I'm working constantly. I'm paying for everything. I just need to feel like we're a team." His expression softened for half a second, just long enough to lure me in. Then he said it. "You're suffocating me, Evelyn." I froze, because he said it like a diagnosis, like a verdict. And in that moment, something clicked with sick clarity. He wasn't stressed. He was resentful. Resentful that I was steady. Resentful that I wasn't dazzled by his fantasies. Resentful that I didn't worship the spectacle the way he did. And I realized something else too. Every time Daniel accused me of control, he was really testing how much of myself I was willing to surrender. And I kept surrendering, because I was still waiting for proof. In my world, suspicion isn't evidence. Emotion isn't enough. I'd been trained, professionally, personally, to look for documentation before making a life-altering decision. So I swallowed the unease. I told myself it was wedding stress. I told myself the chaos would pass once the event was over. I told myself that when the attention was gone, the man I loved would return. But the truth, the ugly, creeping truth, was that Daniel wasn't preparing for a marriage. He was preparing for an exit. And I didn't know it yet, but he was already rehearsing that exit with someone who knew exactly how to feed his hunger for validation. Someone from his past. Someone who'd never really left the story. The week of the wedding arrived like a countdown I couldn't pause. Every hour felt accounted for. Every minute had a purpose. Monday was vendor confirmations. Tuesday was the final fitting and rehearsal logistics. Wednesday, the day everything broke, was supposed to be the reset. The calm before the storm. I took a half day off work, which for me was a major concession. My inbox was already on fire, but I told myself this mattered. We needed to pack for the honeymoon. We needed to finalize the seating chart. We needed, at the very least, to feel like a couple again. That morning, Daniel didn't get out of bed. He claimed exhaustion. Said the fittings had drained him emotionally. Said he just needed one more hour of sleep. I kissed his forehead before leaving. He murmured, "Love you," in that automatic way people do when the words have stopped carrying weight. I told him I'd be home at 1. I arrived at 1:05 p.m. exactly. The condo was silent. Not peaceful, not relaxed. Silent in a way that felt staged. I called out his name. Nothing. No shoes by the door. No music playing. No half-finished coffee on the counter. The kind of absence that doesn't happen accidentally. I walked upstairs. His clothes were still in the closet, but his overnight bag, the expensive monogrammed one he loved, was gone. So was his phone charger. So was his car. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at the empty shelf like my brain was waiting for someone to correct a typo in reality. Then I shifted into assessment mode. Calendar first. No meetings, no spa days, no vendors. Phone next, no missed calls, no texts. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I tried again 15 minutes later. Same thing. Daniel never let that phone die. I sat at the kitchen table and noticed the seating chart still open on my laptop. Names carefully arranged. Families balanced. A $70,000 illusion neatly organized into rows. I started calling. His mother answered cheerfully, told me I was overreacting. He's probably just busy. His sister didn't answer. Neither did his best friend. By 5 o'clock, curiosity hardened into certainty. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was disappearance. I considered calling the police for exactly 30 seconds, then dismissed it. A missing person report would give him sympathy. It would paint me as hysterical, stressed, unreasonable. I didn't need a rescue. I needed truth. At 5:27 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text. From his sister. "Evelyn, please don't drive there. It's worse than you think. I told him not to do this." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Don't drive there. That meant a place, a known place. I told him not to do this. That meant planning, consent, secrecy. The cold settled in instantly. No screaming, no tears, just clarity. I knew exactly where he was. Maya's beach house. The same one he'd described casually months ago. The one he'd insisted was just a memory. The one he claimed he hadn't been to since before we met. I didn't reply to his sister. I didn't need more information. I needed confirmation. I grabbed my keys, stopped at the bank, withdrew cash. If I was about to end this, I was going to do it with proof so solid it couldn't be rewritten. The drive took 2 hours. I used every minute to think, not about heartbreak, but logistics. Deposits lost, payments saved, contracts terminated. By the time I reached the coastal town, the sun was already sinking. It didn't take long to find the house. Daniel's car was parked in the driveway like it belonged there. I parked several streets away and walked the rest of the distance, head down, just another tired tourist in a town full of them. The lights were on upstairs, and there they were. Daniel on the balcony, Maya beside him. She was sitting, relaxed, wearing one of those oversized vacation shirts, like she'd always lived there. He stood behind her, hand on her shoulder. Then he leaned down and kissed the top of her head. Slow, familiar, intimate, the kind of affection he'd stopped giving me months ago. I stood there for 5 full minutes. No shaking, no disbelief, just documentation. Because in my world, emotion isn't evidence, but observation is. I turned around and walked away. The betrayal wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was how easy it had been for him to abandon everything once he thought he'd secured the money. He didn't vanish because he was confused. He vanished because he thought he was safe. And he'd just made the mistake that gave me all the leverage. I didn't confront him. That was the first decision that mattered. Confrontation is emotional. Emotional people make mistakes. And I was done making them. I drove away from the beach town without looking back, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind already moving through contingencies. By the time I hit the highway, I wasn't thinking about Daniel anymore. I was thinking about exposure, proof, execution. I stopped in the nearest town that looked like it still believed in paperwork and fluorescent lighting. A strip mall with a faded sign that read, Legal and Investigative Services. One window lit, one car in the lot. Perfect. The man inside introduced himself as Frank. Late 60s, wrinkled blazer, eyes sharp in a way that told me he didn't need stories, just facts. I need irrefutable proof of a contractual breach, I said. Time-stamped, visual, tonight, and, if possible, last night. He didn't ask if I was okay. He asked for addresses. I handed him cash. $800. Retainer. I showed him a photo of Daniel and Maya, gave him the beach house location, explained the deadline. Friday morning, I said, before 10. He nodded. You'll have it. That was it. No sympathy, no judgment. Just professionalism. I drove home in silence and slept better than I had in months. Thursday passed in a blur of restraint. Vendors called, asking for confirmations. I told them to hold payments due to a logistical delay. I went to work. I smiled in meetings. I didn't tell anyone what was coming. Daniel didn't contact me. That told me everything. Friday morning, 9:42 a.m., Frank knocked on my door with a manila envelope. Inside were photographs, clear ones. Daniel and Maya on the balcony, laughing, drinking, too close. Security stills from the local motel, Daniel checking in, Maya beside him, time-stamped. And then the receipt, the motel charge, paid for with the vendor-only wedding card, the one I'd issued with strict rules. The one meant for florists and caterers. He hadn't just cheated. He'd itemized it. I felt something then, not rage. Satisfaction. Because now it wasn't just betrayal. It was misuse of funds. Documented. Certified. I froze the card immediately. Called my bank. Stopped the final $40,000 payment scheduled for Saturday morning. The deposit, $30,000, was gone. Non-refundable. I accepted the loss. It was cheap compared to what I was about to save. Then I canceled the wedding. One call at a time. The church, the caterer, the florist, the band. I paid penalties. I followed contracts. I stayed calm. I instructed the church to lock the doors and post a cancellation notice with a website link. Yes, a website. Because Daniel loved attention. And attention was exactly what I was about to weaponize. I built it that afternoon. Clean. Black and white. No commentary. Just evidence. Photos, timestamps, the receipt. One sentence beneath it all. The groom chose to spend the days before his wedding with his ex-girlfriend, funding the trip using wedding funds. No insults, no emotion. Facts. I scheduled the email blast for 11:00 a.m., Saturday, 1 hour before guests were due to arrive. Maximum impact, minimal counter-narrative. That night, Daniel came home, smiling, lying effortlessly about a digital detox and vendor emergencies. He handed me the card back like a prop in a play. I took it, nodded. Everything's handled, I said calmly. I negotiated a discount. He looked confused, but relieved. That was the last lie I let him believe. Saturday arrived, dressed like any other wedding day. Sunlight, clear skies, a sense of occasion that felt almost cruel in its normalcy. Daniel was up early, buzzing with nervous energy, moving through the condo like a man who believed everything was still under his control. Stylists arrived. Garment bags filled the hallway. Music played softly in the background. I stayed in my office. At 10:45 a.m., I refreshed the page. Everything was armed. At 11 a.m. sharp, the emails went out. 300 guests, both families, mutual friends, co-workers. The subject line was simple. The wedding is canceled, statement attached. I didn't wait to see the responses. I grabbed my coat and left the condo quietly, walking past Daniel as a stylist adjusted his collar. He didn't look at me. He didn't know he'd already lost. I drove to the church and parked 3 blocks away. My phone buzzed relentlessly. I ignored it. Guests began arriving around 1:30 p.m. They stopped when they saw the doors. Locked. A large printed notice posted beside the welcome sign. Confusion spread first. Then phones came out. And then recognition. Faces shifted. Conversation stopped. Silence settled like a verdict. At 2 p.m., the limousine arrived. Daniel stepped out, radiant, confident, expecting applause. He took 3 steps forward. Then he saw the crowd. Not looking at him. Looking down. Scrolling. He spotted the notice. Typed the link into his phone. I watched his face change in real time. Shock, disbelief, rage. He shouted my name. He threw his phone. He demanded explanations from people who already had answers. I waited until the moment peaked. Then I stepped out of my car. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I leaned in just enough for him to hear me. I paid what I owed, I said quietly. Money, trust, patience. You forfeited the rest. I turned and walked away as his parents pulled him toward the limo, his carefully constructed image collapsing in front of everyone he'd wanted to impress. The doors stayed locked. The truth stayed visible. And the wedding ended exactly as it should have, publicly. The aftermath unfolded exactly the way I knew it would. First came the noise. Calls from unknown numbers. Messages from Daniel's friends, some confused, some angry, some quietly apologetic. His mother tried twice to threaten legal action. Her lawyer sent a letter demanding I take the site down. My lawyer replied with one sentence and an invoice request. Silence followed, because facts don't argue back. I blocked every number tied to Daniel's life. I didn't owe anyone closure. I'd already provided transparency, publicly, time-stamped, and undeniable. 2 weeks later, I moved out of the condo. Not because it was tainted, but because I didn't need the reminder of how much space I'd given someone who treated stability like a cage. I sold it 6 weeks later. Clean exit, clean profit. The $30,000 deposit was gone forever, but what I'd saved, financially, emotionally, psychologically, was worth far more. Work became easy again. Without chaos draining me, I excelled. I earned the promotion I'd been quietly positioned for. I took on higher-level projects. I slept through the night. 3 months passed in calm. Then, on a Saturday seminar I almost skipped, I met Mark. He was 34, infrastructure analyst. Calm, direct, no performance, no need to be admired. On our third date, I told him everything. He didn't flinch. He didn't pity me. He smiled slightly and said, "You didn't explode, you executed." That was the moment I knew I was safe again. Late summer, my friend hosted a barbecue. Daniel was there, thinner, quieter, stripped of confidence. He saw me with Mark and approached, bitterness leaking through every word. "You ruined me," he said. I looked at him, really looked. "No," I replied calmly. "I stopped funding you." Mark squeezed my hand. We left while Daniel was still talking. I didn't look back, because the audit was complete. The contract was terminated. And for the first time in a long time, my life was exactly as it should be. Stable, ordered, mine.